The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained here on Paranormal King Radio Network. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you within a cannon shot of historic Gettysburg in the cryptid Mecca of Pennsylvania. I thank you for joining me. Now, before I introduce my guests, I want to talk about a report I received. And actually, I received this report a while ago. And the gentleman who sent it to me, I did talk to him at the time, and but he has since passed on. But it's a very interesting story, so let me tell you about it. Smith County, Virginia resident swears that there was a hairy man in his woods. Now, he saw it when he was 16 years old. Now, at the age of 68, he thinks it's the same creature. Now, this time, the hairy man carried him home after he had collapsed in the woods. So this is what he writes. I've got a story that may be hard to believe, but I value that it's completely true. I have lived on the same property in Smith County, Virginia, all my 68 years, and I've seen a lot of strange things, though I believe all were natural. But there's one thing in my woods that I have never been able to explain. The first time I saw it, I was 16 or so squirrel hunting in the late afternoon. I was sitting on a large rock wall when I noticed a hairy man running in the hollow below me. It was covered top to bottom with short reddish brown hair. The hair on its head and face were very long. I think it was around 6 foot tall. It made a hell of a racket moving through the brush, crashing branches and grunting up a storm. It then turned around and did the same thing on its way back. I stood up and quickly made my way home. I never said anything to my folks about what I saw. That's the last I had seen this thing until past October. Now, I was dragging old tree branches down into the woods when I stumbled on a tree root. I twisted my knee badly and couldn't stand on it. I lay on the ground in pain, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Then, all of a sudden, I wake up on the porch bench. It's totally dark. I reach over and turn on the porch light. How did I get here? Then I noticed mud on my clothes and mud on the porch floor. There was also a pile of hand-sized creek pebbles on the porch table. I had seen these piles of pebbles throughout the woods for as long as I could remember. That's when I realized that the hairy man in the woods must have brought me home. I wonder if it was the same hairy man I saw when I was a boy. That's the only explanation I can come up with. I don't have any neighbors since I'm living on the ridge. Maybe I'll see it again one day. So I suppose he was picked up and carried by the hairy man, but I guess I'll leave that up to the readers. So this week, I welcome investigator, radio host, and author Shannon LeGro to Arcane Radio. Now, Shannon has been examining the paranormal since she was a teen, having had her own experience which started her on this path. Now, for the past several years, a focus on the phenomena that is Sasquatch. She strives to bring a fresh perspective and an open mind to the most intriguing mysteries in our universe. You can hear Shannon on Into the Fray Radio. She has also been a guest host on Midnight in the Desert. You can see her in Small Town Monsters production On the Trail of Bigfoot, as well as other STM film productions. Now, her recent book is titled Beyond the Fray Bigfoot. Shannon's website is at www.intothefrayradio.com. So, Shannon, thanks for joining me this evening.
Thank you so much for having me, Lon. And can I just say before we get started that you have been kind enough to come on as my guest for not only Into the Fray, for, some of these Mothman sightings in Chicago, which, as you mentioned, we need another update show on. But you and Sean both came on with me for show notes with Shannon way back in the day when I was still with Sasquatch Chronicles and Wes. So I thank you for always being a part of what I'm doing.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
You too, Lon. Yeah, thanks for asking me on.
So why don't you tell the listeners how you became interested in the subject of Bigfoot?
I think most people have that inception story. Either it's a sighting or the Beast of Boggy Creek, the movie, got them into it, something like that. I honestly cannot say, so I won't make up a story, that I remember the light bulb moment where I was like, Sasquatch, yes, this is incredible. I have to delve into this deeper. All I know is I just remember all of a sudden all I wanted to do was read about it. And then when podcasts came around, that was the end of it for me. I couldn't get enough consuming anything about Bigfoot, especially via podcasts.
Now, have you had any personal experiences with an assumed Bigfoot?
I have. I think one of the most notable I had was people might kind of snicker a little because it's a very popular spot for Bigfoot, but I'm here to say that it changed my mind as far as before this happened. I was hopeful, and I thought, yeah, they might be out there. I think there's really a pretty decent chance, as more just hopeful about it. But after this, I was a hopeful believer in that I didn't see anything, but what I heard was astonishing to me. And basically what happened was we were in the primitive campground in Salt Fork State Park, and it is titled Bigfoot Ridge. Again, it's a little hokey, right? Of course, I would have something I would maybe call a Bigfoot in Bigfoot Ridge, but we had been on a service road. It was very late at night, and if anyone's ever been in Salt Fork State Park, Ohio can be very rushy on the ground, whereas if you go somewhere like Utah, there's a lot of aspen trees and not a lot of brush on the ground, so it's very open. Well, in Ohio, the ground brush is quite nasty and thorny and thick, so we had been on this service road and basically surrounded by lots of brush, and it was 11 midnight, 1. I'm not even sure what time of night it was. It was quite late, and we had been swinging a glow stick on a string, and it made a lovely whirring sound like in Crocodile Dundee. It was an idea of a gentleman that we had run into, and his specific reason for being there was Bigfoot, and we figured out that we were both there for Bigfoot, and we kind of teamed up with this man. And he was beyond obsessed because he had a sighting of two creatures right back there. And so we're in this lovely contraption around and taking turns, and hadn't heard anything come in, no sounds, no nothing. And right in front of our location, it must have been 15 feet max back in the brush. And this is ground level, this excruciatingly loud monotone whistle. It was loud and long. And all I can describe it as is it came from something with a big old set of lungs and definitely had lips. And I was standing and I just instinctively went to a crouching position. I didn't really know what else to do. It just was what my brain told me to do. But there was no other sounds. I didn't see anything. It's not the most impactful story, but that sound alone, that whistle alone, it really turned me around after all the years I had been reading and listening to podcasts. And I went, oh my God, I really, really think that these guys are out here. It was not a human being. And it certainly wasn't a massive messed up bird with lips or anything, sitting on the ground brush at 11 o'clock at night. So that was kind of a turning point for me. And, I've been out on other excursions for Bigfoot in Washington State. And I have had the mix of not only, maybe some Bigfoot type stuff, but seeing an orb in the forest, walking, quote unquote, walking, floating through the woods. We thought it was a person walking with a headlamp on or running because it was freezing cold. The rain's coming down. We're like, look at this guy. Man, he's got to be freezing. We were in this dilapidated building taking shelter from this cold rain. And lo and behold, the second week of the thermal up, this orb, I describe it as it noticed us noticing it, and then it dove basically into the ground. We couldn't pick up a thermal signature on this thing at all. So it wasn't a person with a headlamp on. So I don't like to tie things in automatically. I mean, anything is possible. We can't discount anything, and no one's an expert. So, it's all conjecture. But it was interesting to be out there for the purposes of Bigfoot. And then lo and behold, I see the light in the woods. And there was actually several of us out there. There was 5 of us, and we all saw it. But I don't know. It may all tie in.
Yeah, Salt Fork State Park, that place has definitely got something going on there. I've got at least 2 members of my team that have had an experience there. And I have consistently heard reports out of there for many, many years. I don't know. I guess it's just a hot spot. But, I don't know. Can you explain it? Can you kind of give an understanding to people what it is about that location?
Well, one of the theories that has been postured about that area, which makes sense, is that it would run and also through your state, is that it acts as basically a corridor, and they can move through several states, really, undetected and in cover, and depending on food sources and water sources and probably the time of year, we're assuming that they would be smart enough to migrate, and I think that we all have settled on that they are. Especially after the reports that we get and the interactions that people have with these things, down to even tactical movement. So why wouldn't they be smart enough to move from place to place, when they need to? Mm-hmm. So Salt Fork, though, has a massive body of water and plenty of cover. And yeah, there are people in and out of there, but it's not a place where, even in the hunting areas, I've gotten some interesting reports even during hunting season, but that's because they're kind of moving on the outskirts of that, and these guys were like, well, it wasn't technically hunting season when we were there, but it was close, and they had sightings in there. So
I've always believed, or maybe theorized, that there does seem to be a corridor between several states. I'd say like southeast Ohio into Kentucky, over into West Virginia, Maryland, and up into Pennsylvania, almost as like a loop. And it does seem that there may very well be some type of migration at some points in the year. I really don't know what it is. I just haven't, I've heard so many reports within that area that, I'm just wondering if it is very possible that it may be a migration route that kind of circles all those states.
Yeah, it certainly would make sense. And, unfortunately, Salt Fork has gained some notoriety in the last week or 2 of that awful video that's come out. And, and not to give those folks any more, clicks, but goodness gracious, and then the mainstream news glamps onto that stuff, and it's so easy to see that it's a man in coat and pants. So it's unfortunate.
Well, that scream was the worst.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how the media will pick up on something like that. I mean, the ignorance of the phenomena within the media is just, is it just, just for entertainment and clicks value? Maybe. I mean, I'm pretty sure the guys who actually did the video did it to get some notoriety, but it was pretty bad.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's like, do they need the content that bad for the nightly news, or do they just get a kick out of, making those of us that actually take it seriously look like fools, which we're really trying to battle against videos like that and people that come up with just stories off the top of their head that are just wild. However, though, that story that you told in the beginning is very interesting to me, because obviously this man was on this same property basically his whole life, so it stands to reason that this hairy man, as he called it, hairy man of the woods, just knew him and knew he was a good dude and he needed help one day,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really call it an habituation, but he was used to him being around. And of course, when he saw he was in distress, he most likely picked him up and took him home.
Yeah.
And we've heard stories similar to that as well. So that may very well be the facts in that account. You were talking about the old, these faked and hoax videos of Bigfoot. And I just noticed something the other day that's circulating again, is the old Gable film out of the Michigan Dog Man.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That thing is coming out again. And
I didn't see that.
Yeah, people have been posting it again, and that thing was debunked almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I guess when new people get into looking for
exactly.
cryptids,
yeah,
they see that, they go crazy and they decide, I got to post this. This is something remarkable. And then,
it's a dog man video. It's right here. You're like, no. Let's let that go. Hey, Lon, I was going to ask you about, you brought up, you said the word loop, and that it reminded me of the lichen loop.
Mm-hmm.
How many Bigfoot reports do you get in or even around the lichen loop? Or is that, what a lot of people think, like they have their section and then the Bigfoot are over here in their section?
Butch has brought this up before, and I think he's right. The area where we've been getting these upright canine reports, and that's a loop, an oval that extends from Allegheny State Forest southeast into York County, Pennsylvania. Now, the area itself, especially the central part of the state, has been devoid of Bigfoot accounts for a while now. I mean, there is one once in a while, but it's not like it is in western Pennsylvania and in other parts. It just seems to be that we're getting more upright canine reports than Bigfoot reports. Now, are they separating themselves? I guess it's possible. It seems to us that the ridge lines are an area where the dogman upright canines kind of take advantage of when they're moving about, like going north and south, like the Blue Ridge or South Ridge, South Mountain Ridge. It's in the Appalachians, and the Bigfoot don't seem to utilize that. If they do, it's in the valleys. That's because most of our reports of upright canines are in higher areas. So there may be something to that. It's we do have some specific areas in the state where these upright canines have been concentrated, namely in Clearfield County, but Center County, Cambria, and Blair County, they seem to be the hot spots. And as far as getting Bigfoot reports in those areas, we just haven't been getting any. Well, that is very interesting then. I've always wanted to talk to you about that because, I mean, it's the age-old question, would a dog man win against a Bigfoot or vice versa, or do they tend to just go, hey, this is my area, and they just know which section is theirs. They segregate themselves. Right. I mean, Lon, you've had your own Bigfoot experience, and now you're taking all these reports of these upright canines. I mean, would you ever want to see one of those? Well, from the descriptions I've received, no.
Exactly.
These
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
These things are massive.
Yeah.
And they stand their ground.
Mm-hmm.
We unfortunately had no reports of, well, real aggression. There have been some threats, but no real aggression. We've had witnesses who have been armed and come up face to face with these things and just do not attempt to take a shot at it.
Right.
So, I don't know what that's all about, but no, most of these things run anywhere from 8 to 10 foot in height, and they're huge. So
yeah, the descriptions of them being slender, but looking just ultimately more powerful than a human being, even armed, gives you pause. And like you said, they're always ill-tempered, and they do stand their ground. They don't care if people see them.
No, we had one, and I know the show's with you, the guest, but I will say this: we had a report up near Tuscarora State Forest, where we had a hunter up in a tree stand who had what we think was a dog man because it was a quadruped. But this thing, he said it was shaped like a hyena and probably just as big, if not bigger, and had a wolf head. And the thing sat there in the field looking up at him for about 15 minutes, just daring him to do something.
See, having my own sighting, not of a Bigfoot or a dogman, for 5 seconds, a full 5 seconds, that seemed like a long time. For 15 minutes of that would be, good luck trying to sleep again. Does he hunt anymore? Does he even go in the woods anymore?
I don't know, but I know he stayed up in that deer stand for 2 hours before he even thought about coming down.
I bet. And even then, he's probably still going, I hope I make it out of here because of what I just saw. It just seems so unnatural. And all of a sudden you're going, oh my God, that is like nothing I've ever seen in a mammal's book, Well,
the one interesting aspect to what's going on here in Pennsylvania is that we have been in contact with Pennsylvania Game Commission officers. And it's been several of them, actually, who have had sightings. And now, officially, they will not say anything. Right. But when you confidentially, they will tell you what they're seeing. And, they definitely believe that there's something out there.
Now, what kind of experiences have they had? Is it road sightings or up close?
Well, one, for instance, was a commission officer. It was 3 couples. And it was at Rothrock State Park. And it was a new trail that had been put in. So one summer afternoon, these 3 couples decided to go out there and take a walk through this new trail. And the one guy, he was actually armed. He had a sidearm on him. And he was a Pennsylvania Game Commission employee. And one of the women from one of these couples happened to turn around and look back the trail and saw this upright canine standing at the edge of the trail. And she let out a scream. And when she let out a scream, this thing took a couple steps forward. And they were just frozen in fear. So they made their way quickly to the parking lot. And by the time they got there, this thing was standing there at the parking lot.
It was standing in the parking lot where they needed to leave from.
Yep,
oh my gosh!
It doubled up behind them and came up to the parking lot. Of course, they got in their car and this thing was standing on the other end watching them. But and this guy, he was, and actually Butch went up there. He went up to the location. He talked to the witnesses. And pretty hairy. And this is something we've heard of before. That they will end up, they will see you, but they'll make themselves, they'll go around, double back or whatever, and they'll make themselves known. So they are not afraid to be seen.
No. Yeah, they're on my no list. I have a no list of things that I'm like, I'm good. I'm all set with that. I miss the woods. I'm back in the desert. And I don't miss the winters, but I miss going camping. But I think that for the most part, a lot of these dogman sightings that any of us have taken, it's terrifying, and it changes some of these folks' lives to where they're like, yeah, the big city is looking better and better to me. I don't think I need to live near any patch of woods again.
Well, I think back when I was younger, and I used to do a lot of hunting when I was younger. And now that I know what people have been seeing in the woods and other places, I wouldn't even think about going and doing what I used to do. There's just no way. I just wouldn't do it. There's just too much out there that a lot of people just don't know about, but it's out there.
Yeah, definitely on the no list for me. They're angry creatures. They're very maybe they're always hangry. I don't know quite what their problem is, but they're very feisty.
Well, the report, we've been getting reports all over the place too. I mean, it's just not, of course, in Pennsylvania. Of course, some of the more harrowing reports that I've received have been up in Ontario, southern Ontario, and of course, there's always been reports up in Wisconsin and Michigan. So, yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to come across I wouldn't even want to come across a Mothman, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Especially these things that people are seeing in Chicago with size, and they do seem to have a bit of temperament, but they're not as aggressive as, say, the Mothman at Point Pleasant. But they just are very shocking to people.
It was funny. I was at the bank the other day. Well, not the other day. It was like 3 weeks ago. Sorry. A few weeks ago. And it came up about what I did. And this guy, I was sitting at one of the customer service desks with this gentleman. And he goes, yeah, I briefly mentioned my shadow person encounter that usually opens up a whole lot of doors very easily. And it did, because he's like, yeah, we were just outside of Vegas on the 95, and we were coming back into town, a friend of mine and I was driving, and he said that, and it was late, 11, midnight, something like that, but he said off to the right side of the road, and the headlights, they had their brights on because they were on a stretch of road that was, with no street lights, and nobody was coming towards them. And off to the right was this, basically a Mothman type of creature. And I said, okay, well, how tall was it? He said between 6 and 7 feet tall. And it hovered just above the ground with these massive wings. And, I said, well, how fast were you going? He said, well, we were, on the freeway, and I slowed down a bit.
When we were children,
but both of us, we drove past it, and then we both looked at each other and went, what in the actual age was that? And they both, of course, had seen it. And I said, well, did you go back? He's like, heck no, we didn't go back. Nope, we just kept on driving. I agree. I think that between a dog man and these classic Mothman sightings,
unexplained creatures,
it's a life changer, big time. I think it would just rock the foundations of the things that you think are normal. And to me now, of course, the idea of a Bigfoot, and you know better than I do, Lon, but a Bigfoot is a more normal, accepted thing. But when you start talking about these massive dogmen with these ropey muscles and the way that they move, and their joints are popping and cracking, and they're very angry all the time, and then a Mothman, I'm like, that's an entirely different beast, pun intended.
Well, that kind of comes into my next question, as far as Bigfoot and even other cryptids, as to the theory of flesh and blood or supernatural. What do you think?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, that's kind of the question.
I hate answering that question too, but I do.
Yeah. No, it's okay. No. It gets asked pretty much every time, so that's okay. It's tough because, and you've taken these reports too. The Bigfoot are doing weird things, or they see a Bigfoot run up the hill, and it's even in snow, and the snow plays a big part in this, because it's leaving tracks. And then all of a sudden they get up to where they know the Bigfoot ran up the hill. And then all of a sudden the tracks don't go left. They don't go right. There was no tree to grab onto. They're just poof, gone. The tracks stop right in the middle of this massive open area of land with snow on it. It's really hard to describe, right? Or, of course, the the famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, the predator type, right? The shimmery. They can basically go invisible. There are very credible people that say they're out hunting. And well, you probably know exactly what case I'm talking about. But, Bruce Maccabee's wife it was featured in part of David Paulides' book, one of his books. And she was out bow hunting and said that she saw this shimmery being out in the woods. So I don't know. I don't want them at all. And it doesn't matter what I want, but I don't want them to be paranormal at all, because then we'll probably never find out what they are, where they come from, how their family units work. That's all fascinating. That everyday stuff is so fascinating to me. And the fact that we get so little juvenile reports, it brings me hope a little bit, in the fact that I just think that they protect them so well. But I don't want them to be anything paranormal.
Well, you know perfectly well, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, the Bigfoot community was mostly a flesh and blood community. And for the most part, I think it still is. But you have more investigators, researchers, even people that have been around a while, starting to open their minds up to this interdimensional, supernatural possibility with Bigfoot and other cryptids. You talked about seeing an orb associated with a possible Bigfoot, and we've been getting those reports here too. That footprints that just suddenly end, like it either disappeared or sprouted wings and took off or did something. Those become more prevalent more and more. So, you got to wonder what's really going on.
What do you make of the whole, you specifically go out in the woods for Bigfoot, even if you're 1,000% in the flesh and blood camp, and then you see an orb. I mean, that's what happened to me. What do you make of that? Is there a correlation? Is it just a happenstance that this maybe possibly natural occurrence happened while you're out Bigfooting?
I don't know. I mean, now our mutual friend Sean Forker, you look at his experience.
Yes.
Those guys were up there in Clearfield. They were in an area where they're sure there's Bigfoot activity, but they are in a tent. They hear something moving about. They look out. They see something, but they just don't really know what it is. It's something that's moving fast, but it's kind of like it's not really solid. What did they experience?
Right.
And in that same area, those guys have been talking about orb activity for years now. I mean, they have really seen some crazy things there. So, I guess the more and more you hear, about Bigfoot and cryptids, and I've been getting, just talking about the Chicago sightings with these winged humanoids. I have 2 reports of them just simply vanishing, like they went through an invisible doorway, while they're flying.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? It's something that, is becoming more prevalent now with cryptid activity. We even had an upright canine that suddenly appeared in front of someone who was walking their dog, and that was in Clearfield County.
Okay, that's just messed up.
Yeah,
that's got to be worse than I think anything that you could experience. Is it just materializes in front of you? I mean, you don't just walk up on it; it just poof, there it is.
Yeah, and
that's
it's
mind blowing.
And in fact, it was one of the earliest reports we got. It was in a state game land area near what was the town? I forget what it was. Pennville, I guess. Pennville. Anyway, it was this gentleman was walking his dogs, and this thing just suddenly appeared, huge upright canine, walking away from them. Dogs going nuts, trying to break free, go after this thing, and this creature didn't even seem to even bother or didn't even notice that they were there. So, Was it another dimension? Was it parallel or whatever? I don't know. What was it? And that's just something that we've been getting that, it really puts a monkey wrench in theories, I guess.
Sure does. It really does. And it makes you wonder if the dog had gotten loose, would it just have ran right through the thing, Or, I mean, like you said, maybe it was, like you kind of mentioned another dimension, like maybe like basically like a glitch in the Matrix, right? It just kind of blips in and out. And I've said that. It's so cool that you said that, because I've said that about the only thing I've ever seen with my own eyes besides the orb was those 4 shadow people running in the woods when I was a teenager. That's what got me started on all of that stuff. And I always say they didn't interact with me. They didn't look over. They didn't wave. And, I think it would have been a much different experience had they interacted with me, but they didn't. It was still impactful. But I often have said, I wonder if I just got a glimpse into another world for a second, because they certainly weren't interacting with the trees that they were running by and quote unquote through either. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
I remember you telling me that story, and you were on ATV or something, and you happened to see these things in the woods. Yeah. But you know what? I have heard other people describe very similar instances where they would be somewhere outdoors or somewhere, and they would see a series of shadow people shadowing them, basically.
And it shows like basically paralleling them, but so they were interacting with them. See, that would be extremely scary to me.
Yeah.
That would change it all.
I mean, what is that? You also mentioned earlier about the Glimmering Man effect, just like Predator movies. I get more and more of that all the time now. I mean, people wonder what that is, or they see something that seems to manifest, and then this thing turns into this Glimmering Man effect.
Right, and is it doing that because it can't fully, like as you said, manifest is probably the right word. It can't fully get there, or is that its intention is to stay right at that perfect place where you're going? What in the world is that?
That's the question. I mean, is it something that's trying to manifest that can only do but so much, or is it actually cloaking somehow?
Right.
That's the big question. And I mean, is it something that's relative to cryptid activity, even spirit activity? I've become more and more convinced that the paranormal is so connected in so many ways that UFOs, cryptids, spirit activity, the whole 9 yards is somehow connected to each other. And I see more and more that kind of coincides. I mean, it sounds crazy to some people, but I don't know. There's something definitely going on.
I mean, I think anything is possible, and you did mention UFOs, and I think one of the glaring things that comes out for all of this, as far as things that people don't want it to be connected, and you take the inner subjects and you weave them together. I think one of the best examples for that is when you have a quote unquote classic abduction case, and I don't mean to diminish that in any way by calling it classic, but you're taken up on the ship, you're experimented on, you get put back home. But then unfortunately at home, you're experiencing basically poltergeist activity. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about just you're seeing grays in your room. We're talking about dishes are flying around. Things are not, there's rapping on the doors, and things are happening that shouldn't be associated with aliens in any way, shape, or form.
More, and I'd say most experiencers, let's put it that way, people that have had interactions with non-terrestrials, more and more these witnesses do experience some type of unexplained phenomena that you wouldn't associate with alien activity.
Right.
That you associate more with paranormal or spirit or entity activity.
Right.
is the energy so close or so similar that it causes that? That's a possibility. You know, that's something I'm always looking into. The connections between energy, spirit activity, and extraterrestrial or EBE activity. There does seem to be a lot of similar aspects to that. But then again, then you look into the cryptids. You talk to people who have seen Bigfoot coming out of spacecraft, or other things that may be related. You talk to Stan Gordon, and the UFO Bigfoot connection.
Yeah.
That he has investigated for years. You hear a lot about that as well. And now, of course, we more and more we get these Bigfoot sightings that where an investigator will go out to where the Bigfoot had been reported and see orbs. So what's that all about?
I can tell you that it was cool that it happened, but I was definitely flabbergasted when I saw the orb with the other people with me. Wes was out there, and Kirk Brandenburg, and of course John Brown. And I was really taken aback by that. And I was almost frustrated. I wasn't angry, but I was just frustrated because I was going, did that really just happen while we're out here for Bigfoot? Are we one of those now? I was a little miffed by it. It's so cool that it happened, and it did. And there was other people to verify, thankfully. I'm sure it's always frustrating. Well, I know firsthand because my brothers were ahead of me on their four-wheelers, so I was the only one that saw the shadow people. But it's always great to have other people witness something with you. But when you have I guess the best thing was, we were all in that same camp, flesh and blood, and even Kirk had this fantastic FLIR thermal monocular, and he's going, that's not a guy. I've got no heat signature. Like, we just thought he dove down in the ground because he got freaked out because he saw people looking at him, in the middle of the night. Nothing there. And we're kind of going, what in the world? But, I'm missing a little portion of the story, which is also interesting. Not impossible that this was people as far as this part goes. But as we exited that building that was kind of falling apart, that's why we had a good view of this quote unquote orb. We exited the building because the rain had stopped, and we're still trying to therm for the crazy person running in the woods with the headlamp on, and see if he's okay, because he took a big digger into the ground. There was a metal building next to us, and something slapped it very, very hard and made a racket of a noise. Boom, boom, boom. And scared the bejesus out of us, for sure. Because at that point, we're focused on this over here, and now we have this action off to our right. It was right next to us, and we immediately walked around, and there's nothing there. Now, again, I cannot discount that as a person at all, but the orb thing was definitely very, very strange. But the point of that was I was slightly miffed at seeing the orb while we're out for Bigfoot, but John Brown himself, that was his property, the Brown property in Washington State. Everyone is probably very familiar with their linebacker on the ridge thermal shot, right? With So he told us that off to the left of their property, you could see this, basically a massive ridge that climbs in elevation. And in amongst the trees, on more than one occasion, he had seen what he thought were just random campfires burning, and then one would wink out and another one would start up, and he's just going, I don't know if they were campfires, but that's just what I call them. So it was going on there, more than just the one time that we experienced that orb.
Well, you do hear about a lot of different light orbs and all types of other things associated with cryptids and such. So, I just think there's definitely some type of connection there. And we talked about the upright canines dog man, and there possibly being some type of connection with the Bigfoot. This is one thing that has always gotten me kind of in a bit of a tizzy, or people seeing actual Bigfoot or actual dogmen or upright canines. What are they actually seeing?
Right.
I mean, is this something that may be interchangeable at some point? I don't know. I have gotten reports. I have gotten reports from people who have swore they saw a Bigfoot, but when you get the report and you start wondering, well, I've never heard of Bigfoot that had a thin waist or a snout before.
Right.
Yeah, and you do get that occasionally. They just assume it's a Bigfoot because that's what they know about. They don't know anything about the upright canines or the dogmen. So, that's just something else to consider. But, there's a lot to consider in this whole genre. You're a lot like me where you're an eclectic as far as the paranormal goes. You just don't concentrate on one thing. You take, of course, you're on the radio, you're doing interviews, of course, you with Seth and them with Small Monsters, and you talk to a lot of different people, and you get a lot of different takes on other type of phenomena. And I mean, you got to wonder what is really going on.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because you'll be talking to someone, and I know it's happened to you too. You'll get like a quick email or something, and I've got a Bigfoot encounter, or hey, I saw a craft one night, and then it just completely unfolds from there, and it keeps unfolding, and the details just where it basically looks like a pyramid. It starts so small at the top, and you think it'll be a Bigfoot encounter, and then it just opens up into all of these other subjects, basically, and it becomes a brain dump for somebody, and then you're kind of left to go, oh gosh, another one of these, which it's great for us because we love to consume this stuff, and it just adds more data to the pile, which it adds more data to the pile. It goes both ways on that one, right? But I'm finding that more and more. I'll have somebody, and I love the emails that are very vague. I don't want to know all the details before I talk to somebody. It's my favorite thing, because the questions just form more naturally that way, because you're just going, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. Well, what about this? What about that? And it's happening more and more, big time. I don't know what to make of that. I don't, like I said, I hate to keep saying this, but I would rather and Travis Walton will tell you this himself. I haven't met him, but I know this is how he feels about it. The movie Fire in the Sky, the big blockbuster movie, was not what happened to him, Absolutely. But that's what I would rather think of. And that sounds so bad to say. I don't mean like as far as the horrible stuff that happened to him, but I'm just saying, like, I would rather the aliens be over here and they're taking samples and then they're going back in their ships and they're dropping people off and it's horrible. But that's where they stay. They're not creating poltergeist activity, or that's not tied in to the ghost stuff or demons. I mean, now it's the aliens or demons thing. It is getting even bigger now. I'm sure that you're well aware of that. So it's so tough out here now. I mean, I love it because there's a lot to chew on intellectually, but it's tough.
Well, there are a lot of variables. I wrote this last book, the Alien Disclosure book. And, of course, my case with David Eckhart and all the variables that have been involved with him, with abduction and, experimentation he's witnessed. I can't, and there's just no way I can come out and tell everything that he has told me. Some of it's so remarkable. Well, I know, I mean, even stuff I've talked about seems too remarkable, but people got to realize he's not the only person who's telling this stuff. There are a lot of people that have been experiencing very similar phenomena that either just are too afraid to come out or just don't want to go into detail. Fortunately, David's going into detail. And he has offered so much to me in the way I'm seeing things, as opposed to what a lot of people think about with aliens. I hate it when these people tell me, "Well, I wish I was abducted. I'd like to go through that." Oh, no, you don't.
Mm-mm.
You know,
No.
you had no idea what you're getting into. I've talked to people who have been abducted several times. It's a family thing. It's a generational thing. It's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
and more, it's so much bigger than just you're aboard a craft and you have a bump on your leg or something or in the back of your neck the next day and you don't quite remember what happened. It is so much more than that when you really start to talk to these people.
Yeah,
it affects their everyday. I mean, forget the not sleeping and stuff. That is a given. The not sleeping well would be a hazard of the process, I'm sure, but it's everything else that comes along with it. I mean, but don't you sometimes wonder then if every single thing that we talk about is the result of just one thing and we're just not putting it together?
That's a distinct possibility. I think that all the time. I mean, is there one single variable that just, creates all these outshoots and it's just one thing that's actually causing all this?
Right. Like the ultimate puppeteer.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to call it God or something. We're just saying like the ultimate, just a master of puppets up there. And he's like, well, today we're gonna create this for you, and you are never gonna sleep right again. Congratulations. I mean,
this is the one thing that David has told me from the very beginning that has messed with my mind, but has kind of given me a perspective of things. He has talked about the reptilians that he, especially the one reptilian that was the one who had taken him to these various locations. And this thing basically told him that they do have a supreme being that all or most of these races look up to, that they follow. Well, is it our same God that people believe in?
Right. So he meant even our quote unquote earthbound beings like Bigfoot or Dogman or any of it. So everything. Wow.
Wow. What's that all about? So,
I mean, we're sitting here talking about orbs in the woods and Bigfoot and upright, canines and all this stuff. So is it that crazy to say that? I don't think so. I don't. And anything is possible at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time and I've heard a lot of different things. I would think sometimes, well, I've heard it all. Nah. There's always something that pops up that just totally blows your mind and makes you rethink everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go. So what's the future of Bigfoot research? What do you think? Where do you think it's going to go next?
Oh, another good one for me, Lon. Well, I wish people would stop just arguing on Facebook about stuff. That would be a good start.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to happen. But, it's like delving into politics. It's just a waste of time. But I think that we're still so split on, we need a body. We don't need a body. Well, science needs it. And I will agree that it does. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the future looks like for Bigfoot research, but if you take the cutaway that I'm seeing just online, it's not good. It really worries me. It worries me a lot. But there are still a lot of young people that are interested in it, which makes me hopeful. In fact, one of the people that was recently on my show, and I won't mention her name, but her son, knows of me and knows that I'm around to help them out with their situation. And he made a little video about Bigfoot. And I just think it's wonderful because he's only 4 and he's totally into Bigfoot and he can't wait to just learn everything that he can about them. And he's talking about here's what they like to eat and here's where they sleep. And I think it's no different than the UFO field. I know that Ryan Sprague has talked about this a lot. He's like, we need the young guns to come up And it's great to have the originals, like the Four Horsemen of UFO and the Four Horsemen of Bigfoot and all this stuff. That's great. And they paved the way for everybody. But we need people to get out into the woods. And here I sit saying this in the desert of Las Vegas, of course. But, if I was jet set, I'd be in Ohio and Pennsylvania every weekend, but I'm not. But we need people out in the woods and coming up with maybe some fresh ideas on how to prove these things. And I don't even think it's so much about maybe proving them to science. I think that's no different than disclosure for UFOs, right? Like it's the D word. And
yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
No,
honestly.
And honestly, if you have your own confirmation experience, isn't that pretty dang cool in and of itself anyway? I mean, I live in Vegas and everyone goes, oh, well, you must see UFOs all the time. I've not seen one single thing that I could not identify. Right. So I've seen no UFOs, even though I'm in Las Vegas. But the future basically just needs to be still keeping that open mind, getting out in the woods, sharing what you know. People get really hung up on, and I get maybe if it's, a certain property that people can't visit or something, I get that because people get nuts with, they're bringing guns out and stuff. We've seen old newspaper reports like that, right? Like at Boggy Creek, look what happened there. But people just need to get out there and try to do the work and not be so judgmental either of other folks that are actually out doing it.
So, tell folks how they can get your book and what projects do you have in the future?
Yeah, so Beyond the Fray Bigfoot is, of course, on Amazon. We've got the paperback and the Kindle, and we are working on the audiobook. I know people have been asking about that. And actually, in the future, right at this moment, in the future, it will be up for grabs is the second volume of Beyond the Fray, and it is titled Paramalgamation. And that's a word that I came up with for an episode of mine a while back that it was an amalgamation. It was all over the place. I'm like, what am I going to title this episode? Because I pride myself on the titles, right? It has to grab people. So it was paranormal and it was all over the place. So Paramalgamation. So we're hoping for, we'd love for early April release for that, but maybe mid-April, we'll see. But that is up for pre-order right now on Amazon. And of course, Small Town Monsters on the Trail of UFOs will be out shortly. The Kickstarter is still up for people if they wanted to back any of the three projects for 2020 for Small Town Monsters. Just go to Kickstarter.com and search Small Town Monsters. And we've got some, of course, Mothman stuff coming up. And I think the new stretch goal is looking at the Lake Michigan Mothman. So pretty cool. I'd be so excited to work on that, any Mothman stuff. So a lot coming up for not only Beyond the Fray, but for projects with Small Town Monsters.
Well, excellent. Well, Shannon, thanks again for coming on the show, and we got to talk soon.
Absolutely. Well, you too, Lon. You're welcome on Into the Fray anytime. Thank you so much.
You take care now and have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms of Monsters blog site. Now, if you're interested in supporting Phantoms of Monsters and Arcane Radio, you can use the PayPal donation buttons on the blog and newsletter, or go directly to paypal.com and use my email, lonstrickler@phantomsofmonsters.com, as the recipient. Your continued support is truly appreciated. I want to again thank Shannon LeGro for joining me this evening, and I want to thank you for listening to this show. Good night, and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.